how much do you think camp means to you, teaching a new system, things like that, and versus maybe changing a culture here, the problems that there were in the locker room, maybe underachieving? What do you see as your most important thing as you start camp?
Defense. I would say defense in terms of, just basketball. I know there'll be a lot of talk about the triangle offense and how different players are going to work in it and whether or not it's the right fit. And, that generally happens with this system. But for our team, from a basketball perspective, I think defense is what we have to focus on from day one. At the same time, I agree with the sentiment that the culture allows for these things to flourish even more. And so as we put time in on the court and we do the things we need to do in terms of X's and O's and practices and workouts, we also have to work hard at creating the type of environment and culture for success. And then the basketball will come along as we go. Some teams are capable of doing things that other teams can't do. So for us, we're for sure going to try to just be consistent, not necessarily simplify, but just really be consistent. The feedback we've gotten from our players is that, consistency on both ends of the floor is something they're looking for. And so we're going to try and just be consistent in what we teach and what we do, but we're going to prioritize defense. And so, a lot of focus will be on what we do offensively and how guys are going to fit into it or buy into it, or, whether or not our players like it or don't like it. But, successful teams play defense. There's no way around it. The numbers, the stats, the history tell you the best teams are the better defensive teams, and we have to figure out a way to break into, the elite defensive teams in some way.
Derek, I know that, you said you've had discussions with Jason Kidd and probably several other coaches. What do you think some of the bigger adjustments or the bigger adjustment will be for you to make once you take the sideline on an NBA game?
Yeah, in terms of adjustments, obviously every night there's an adjustment to make, regardless of what your experience level is as a player or as a coach. I think the main thing will be just understanding the level of communication required, to make sure that players are clear and the team is clear about, expectations, about what it is you want to see, how you want things happening out on the floor. But, realizing that you're responsible in a way for everyone. And, as a player and even as a leader on some teams, there were still guys that you could trust were responsible for themselves. You didn't have to lose a lot of sleep worrying about how they were feeling, where they were going, what time they were showing up. And now as a coach, those things are, in a lot of ways, my responsibility. For 1 through 15, I care about those guys. I care what matters to them. It matters to me. And so just, adjusting in ways to make sure that I carry that with me at all times.
Derek, what have you seen from Amari so far? What kind of shape does he look like he's in, and how do you see him fitting in with what you want to do?
Yeah, Amari physically, he looks great. He looks like he's in fantastic shape. He's very focused on coming into this season healthy, and I think he's accomplished that goal. I think we'll all work together to try and manage as best as possible, what we're seeing in real time. His knees will be an issue at some point in terms of just managing the process, watching his minutes in some respects, how we're loading him in practice and when we can give him some days to get off of his feet and get some rest. But I think he's willing to come in and buy into what we're going to teach, and he's ready to go. He's excited.
I imagine a guy who played as long as you did probably knew how to, pace yourself through training camp and how much work you really needed and things like that. Is that going to be a challenge, figuring out what the players need, how much you have to push them and not push them and things like that starting next week?
Unfortunately, Brian, I did not know how to do that. I would have played another 10 years if I knew how to manage that better. I just learned that in the last couple of years of how to better manage a full season in terms of slowing down a little bit in training camp and practices. But no, I'll for sure have to learn, how to observe, this team and this group of players. All players are different. Guys recover at different levels and different speeds. And, I think the idea behind it in the NBA is that it's a journey. It's a marathon, and it's not a sprint. And players don't have to physically maximize all of their energies and max them out by the end of October. And then we have 82 games to play, after that. So we'll try and be as smart as possible, not just myself, but our entire coaching staff. We have great people in our medical and performance staff that are doing some cutting-edge things in terms of monitoring our players and their workload and their usage rates. And we're going to do our best, to manage guys. But this is a job, and it's a hard job. And only 450 people in the world that get to do this job. So it won't be easy regardless of what we do, but we're going to try our best to do it the right way.